Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Coastal Conservancy's latest funding webinar. First, I'd like to introduce the Coastal Conservancy staff on this webinar today. I'm Evan Borgnes-Sloan, Deputy Executive Officer. We also have Trish Chapman, the Central Coast Regional Manager, and Megan Cooper, the South Coast Regional Manager. We will be providing this presentation, but during the presentation, please feel free to enter any questions you have in the chat. Kara Kemmler, the Deputy Regional Manager for the South Coast, will be monitoring the chat and helping us respond to questions. We should have enough time at the end to cover everybody's questions. If you have technical difficulties, we also have Marilyn Lotta, Project Manager in the Bay Program, here to monitor the chat, and she will try to help you. So today we will be talking about the Coastal Conservancy's funding allocation from the 2020 known as Proposition 4. We will then explain the grant application process and how to work with us to apply for funding for projects that fit within the Conservancy's objectives. We are not going to be covering the Explore the Coast or Coastal Stories grant programs today. Those programs have annual requests for proposals or RFPs separate from the general rolling grant application process at the Conservancy, and there are resources and recorded webinars on our website to learn more about Explore the Coast and Coastal Stories. The State Coastal Conservancy's vision is of a beautiful, restored, and accessible coast for current and future generations of Californians. We don't do any of our work alone. We act with others, all of you, to protect and restore and increase public access to the coast. In terms of our jurisdiction, the Coastal Conservancy works along the coast in the 9 San Francisco Bay Area counties and coastal watersheds, and in the jurisdiction of the Santa Ana River Conservancy. One of the most important tools guiding our work is our strategic plan. Our strategic plan for 2023 to 2027 lays out our vision, goals, and measurable objectives. Projects that we fund must help us accomplish the goals and objectives in our strategic plan. The first goal is Goal 1, prioritize equity. We will do this by funding projects that directly benefit systemically excluded communities and include robust community engagement and workforce development. We also achieve this by funding projects that return power to tribes. Goal 2 of our strategic plan is Enjoy the Coast. Under this goal, we will fund projects like the Explore the Coast program and Coastal Stories, but again, these two programs are not covered in this webinar today. There are other projects that could help implement this goal, which include expanding accessibility for people with disabilities, building trails, recreational facilities and amenities, enhancing piers and waterfronts, and increasing the availability of lower cost overnight accommodations, also known as our Explore the Coast Overnight program. Goal 3 is to protect and restore the coast. We do this by funding projects that conserve land, restore or enhance habitats, protect and enhance working lands, or cut green tape to move restoration forward more expeditiously. Our fourth goal is climate ready. This goal focuses on projects that help our coastal communities adapt to sea level rise, increase wildfire resilience, and provide multi-benefit nature-based climate adaptation. The 2024 Climate Bond, also known as Prop 4, was approved by voters in November of 2024 and provides $10 billion for natural resources and climate activities. The $10 billion is divided among program areas such as clean water, fire, resilience, biodiversity, and coastal resilience. There is approximately $1.2 billion for coastal resilience in the bond, and a lot of that will be coming to the Conservancy for distribution through grants and contracts. The Coastal Conservancy will receive approximately $950 million for coastal resilience through the full 2024 climate bond. This money is broken into several different program areas, and a majority of the funding is for coastal flooding and coastal resilience. There are other smaller pots for specific geographies and programs. The 2024 Climate Bond will fund similar work to the work we've been doing over the past few years with General Fund Coastal Resilience funding, and will continue to support our goals and objectives identified in our 2023 to 2027 strategic plan. The focus of the Climate Bond is climate resilience with meaningful benefits to vulnerable communities. Projects addressing climate change and benefiting disadvantaged communities will rise to the top. Now I'll explain the different program areas in the bond that are for the Coastal Conservancy. First, there is $350 million for coastal flood management. The coastal flood management funding will support coastal and combined coastal and river flood management projects. Projects can address both current flooding and future flooding due to sea level rise. This funding is specific for projects located within developed shoreline areas, including areas with critical community infrastructure such as transportation and port infrastructure. Funds are targeted to be multi-benefit projects that improve public safety and shoreline resilience, including strategies such as engineering with nature or nature-based features. The bond also includes $450 million for coastal resilience projects, and $85 million of this is specifically for San Francisco Bay. The coastal resilience funds can be used for a broader set of activities compared to the coastal flooding funding. The coastal resilience funds are for projects that protect, restore, and increase the resilience of beaches, bays, coastal dunes, wetlands, coastal forests, watersheds, trails, and public access facilities. This specifically includes projects to adapt to our changing climate and sea level rise, projects to protect coastal lands and restore habitats, natural and nature-based projects that use existing natural areas to minimize coastal flooding, erosion, and runoff, San Francisco Bay Area Conservancy Program projects and projects that align with the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, lower cost coastal accommodation projects. We will continue to prioritize multi-benefit projects, innovative climate resilience projects, projects that further the state's plans, and projects that benefit vulnerable communities. And now I will pass it over to Trish Chapman to take it from here.
Okay, the bond also includes 33.5 million for wildfire resilience, and we will continue to work on those wildfire resilience in our jurisdiction with a high priority on forest management efforts in the wildland urban interface, and also a priority for projects that incorporate workforce development designed to create career pathways for individuals from disadvantaged and vulnerable populations. The climate bond also requires that 40% of the funding must provide meaningful and direct benefits to disadvantaged communities, and 10% of those funds must provide benefits to severely disadvantaged communities. In the bond, a disadvantaged community is defined as a community with a median household income of less than 80% of the area average or the statewide median household income. And a severely disadvantaged community is one with a median household income of less than 60% of the area average or of the statewide median income. A vulnerable population is defined in the bond as a subgroup of population within a region or community that faces disproportionately heightened risk or increased sensitivity to impacts of climate change and that lacks adequate resources to cope with, adapt to, or recover from such impacts. So now I'm going to talk about what was proposed in the governor's budget for the Coastal Conservancy in the 2025-2026 fiscal year. And that proposed budget includes $110 million in climate bond funds for the Conservancy, as shown in this slide. We expect to get climate bond funds annually in the budget over the next 5 to 10 years. And this rollout will allow us to provide sustained support for communities as they plan and implement projects to address climate change. The first appropriations to the Conservancy will be received in July 2025 when the budget is signed, and that's when we'll actually know what the final amount is. It could change from what was proposed in the governor's budget, so we won't know for sure until the budget is finalized. But we are accepting applications now, and those applications are open on a rolling basis. Since we accept applications at any time and don't have a deadline, that means you should apply for funding when your organization is ready and when the project is ready and not on any specific timeline of ours. Our board approves funding at 4 or 5 public meetings each year. And the first board meeting that would be possible for approval of climate bond funds is September of 2025, but November of 2025 is more likely. We also wanted to point out that there are other agencies that have gotten funding in the climate bond that that fund the types of projects the Conservancy has funded in the past. And if you're working on these types of projects, we recommend you start with the agencies that have funding specific to your type of project. And specifically, the climate bond allocates approximately the following: approximately $1 billion to the Wildlife Conservation Board to support both 30 by 30 projects and wildlife crossing projects. There's also $180 million to the California Natural Resources Agency for urban greening projects, tribal nature-based solutions program, and education facilities. And the Ocean Protection Council has received $210 million in the bond for sea level rise and climate resilience. And we are coordinating with other CNRA agencies to ensure we are selecting projects and distributing bond dollars in a coordinated, strategic, and transparent fashion. So who is eligible for Conservancy grants? So it's public agencies, nonprofits with that qualify for 501c3 status, federally recognized tribes, and non-federally recognized tribes or other organizations if they are working via a fiscal sponsor. For our grant amounts, there is no set maximum or minimum, and grants range from around $100,000 up to $2 to $5 million, and it depends upon the phase and type of project. So the more expensive projects would be acquisitions or actual implementation of restoration type projects. And then what is allowed, we will fund land acquisitions, both fee acquisition and conservation easements. We will fund project-specific planning, including feasibility studies, design, permitting, CEQA, community engagement related to the project. Excuse me. And we will fund implementation, including final design, bid documents, and hiring contractors, construction, and workforce development related to the project. And finally, we will fund also monitoring and adaptive management specific to the project. Our project selection criteria, we'll just go over the high points of them. So first, is the project a good investment of state resources? And there's a variety of things that we consider in that, but is it cost effective? Is there leverage for the state funds? Are there multiple benefits? Does it help accomplish our strategic plan in a meaningful way? Does the project include a serious effort to engage tribes? Will the benefits be sustainable or resilient over the project lifespan? And does the project deliver multiple benefits and significant positive impact? And was the project planned with meaningful community engagement, or will it be if it hasn't been planned yet? And is there broad community support for the project? And now I'm going to hand it off to Megan Cooper.
Thanks, Trish. On the next slide, I'm going to start. Could we move to the next slide? Thank you so much. On this slide, now I'm going to start talking a little bit about the application process for Coastal Conservancy funds. First, as Trish mentioned, we accept applications on what is called a rolling basis, which means you can submit your application at any time. You do not need to wait for a request for proposals. Okay, so our application is a two-step process. The first step is to submit a pre-application. We will review your application to determine project eligibility and funding availability within 60 days. This shorter pre-application form is designed to be more straightforward to complete, to share high-level information on the proposed project, and to save you time in confirming whether a project is a good fit before spending the time developing a full application. If needed, applicants can request a technical assistance consultation with staff prior to submitting a pre-application. So this could be a simple email contact to the regional manager where your project is located, or Conservancy staff with a short elevator pitch of your project idea, or you could request to schedule a meeting to discuss your project details. And this can be beneficial if you have questions about project eligibility. So next, if the pre-application, oops, sorry, back to the previous slide, just my next bullet. If the pre-application meets the Conservancy's eligibility criteria and there is available Conservancy funding for the project, and we determine that the project will be competitive based on our project selection criteria, you will be invited to submit a full application. At this stage, Conservancy staff will provide you feedback on your project that will help you develop your application to meet our goals and objectives in our project selection criteria. So you will then submit your application on your own timeline. There is no deadline for your application. The sooner you get your application in, the sooner we consider your project for funding. Once your full application is submitted, again, we will respond to you within 60 days to let you know whether or not a grant award will be recommended. And then the final step is if we are going to recommend your project for funding, we will present the grant proposal at a public board meeting where our board will vote on the grant. Next slide. We have a number of resources for you to help clarify the application process and to streamline the steps for applying for grants. Our aim here is to help make the process as easy and efficient for you all as possible. We are committed to increasing the reach and accessibility of our grants, and we want to further engage with local communities and to support community-led efforts. So key resources that you will find on our website include our grant application guide, which is a complete set of instructions that I'll go over a little bit more in a minute, our pre-application and full application templates, and our technical assistance webpage, which has links to lots of resources like webinars on how to write a successful application, information you will need to know to manage your grant if you receive one, and tips on meaningful engagement, workforce development, and more. I also want to let you know that we have a grantee manual on our website. This provides very detailed information of how our grants work. And you don't need to read all of this at the application stage, but there may be specific issues in there that you want to figure out before you apply for the Coastal Conservancy for a grant. And of course, as I mentioned, additionally, Coastal Conservancy staff is available for you to give you feedback on your project ideas and to help you develop your project. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us at any time. Next slide. As I mentioned, we have a grant application guide on our website. This application guide provides step-by-step instructions on how to complete a pre or a full application for the Coastal Conservancy. This guide includes a full overview of our grant programs, all the application steps, the templates that you will need to use for your application, a checklist to help you make sure that all required information is included, guidance on how to develop budgets and tasks, including eligible costs, and many additional resources to help make your application successful. This application guide goes through each question in the application and provides suggestions and guidance and tips for how best to answer each question. Also, be sure to dive into our strategic plan and our project selection criteria, because these documents are what we will use to rank your proposal and determine if we will recommend funding. I just want to emphasize again, please use this guide because it will save you a lot of time in making your application more competitive. Next slide. Prior to preparing an application, there are some key grant requirements to be aware of, such as the Coastal Conservancy's grants are reimbursable grants. That means you do the work first, and then you will submit an invoice to the Coastal Conservancy. All grants must be authorized by the Conservancy Board. Please remember that we only have 4 or 5 meetings each year, so you have to build that into your schedule to allow time for that process. After board authorization, a grant agreement will be signed between the Conservancy and the grantee. You will need a resolution from your governing board, either your city council or your nonprofit board, to accept the grant and sign the grant agreement. You will then need to provide us with a task-based work program and budget, including subcontractors, for us to agree on before you start work on the grant. You will need to provide $1 to $2 million insurance coverage. And then just to be aware, you can't start work on your grant or billing to your grant until you have signed the agreement with the Coastal Conservancy and all of the preconditions of the grant have been approved. Next slide. The next slide, just real briefly on the full proposal. So if we determine that your project is eligible for funding, we will ask you for a full application. I'm not going to run through that in detail here because it is really detailed in our grant application guide. Essentially, the full proposal or full application will be about 10 pages, but there's no required length. We suggest that you be specific about the tasks and deliverables that you plan to do in your grant. So as much specificity that you can provide us about your activities and what you plan to do will be the most helpful. I want to mention just a few items for you to be aware of in your grant application. First of all, CEQA. We will need to make CEQA findings for your project, so be prepared to explain CEQA status. Tell us about the partners that you're working with on your project and what role they will be playing. Be ready to explain the long-term management and maintenance plans for the project. And finally, please be prepared to explain how you have engaged and plan to continue to engage with systemically excluded communities and California Native American tribes on your project. And remember to use the application guide. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. Next slide. Okay, so once you have prepared your application, your pre-application or your full application as a Word document, you just email that into our grants email address. If you don't have Word, you can download the template, then open that up with something like Google Docs or an online software, and then download that as a file and email that into us. Please don't send paper copies. Make sure to keep a copy of your application for your records. Please don't submit anything in addition to what we have asked for, like PowerPoints or letters of support or anything like that. Just provide what we've asked for in the grant application. And finally on that, I just want to say we really look forward to working with you on developing and supporting your projects. So next slide is, thank you so much for joining our webinar today. I believe we have a lot of questions, so we're going to go into answering some of those questions now. If we don't have time to get to all of your questions, we will try to answer them in a follow-up email after the webinar. Thanks very much.
Great. Well, we have a lot of good questions in the Q&A. Some of the common questions are around our jurisdiction, what qualifies as coastal. So if we could just clarify jurisdiction, which Amy helped answer in the chat, which is correct, but maybe not everyone saw it, which is our jurisdiction is along the California coast, including the coastal watersheds and the 9 Bay Area counties. And then another question, someone asked about application. I think we covered that pretty well. So if anybody has any clarifying questions, please add to the Q&A section. Another common question is about clarification around non-federal recognized tribes and how they can apply. Can public universities co-apply with tribal organizations, and what is a fiscal sponsor? Do you want to help with that one, Megan? Like clarifying all who the eligible grantees would be, and then for those who aren't eligible, how they could use a fiscal sponsor to apply.
Sure. So non-federally recognized tribes, essentially working with a partner, would be eligible to apply. So a nonprofit partner that perhaps was created by a non-federally recognized tribe to be a funding partner, or a fiscal sponsor would be a nonprofit agency, typically who provides sort of administrative services to smaller nonprofits and is an eligible 501c3 to receive funding, and they can also help with submitting invoices and do administrative work like that, would be considered a fiscal sponsor. And then I heard you say working with the university as well. Yeah, absolutely. Universities are eligible applicants as well. So a tribe partnering with the university and receiving funding through the university via the Coastal Conservancy grant would absolutely be eligible. So there's lots of ways that a non-federally recognized tribe could partner with an eligible grantee to receive funding.
We had someone ask if you're eligible to apply if you have an existing grant with the Coastal Conservancy. The answer is yes. And a question about which state agency to apply to if you meet most requirements. So our guidance would be to apply wherever you feel like your project is the best fit. And if it's all of them and you have the time to apply, I think we and WCB are the two agencies that have the pre-proposal process, where it's a shorter application that you can submit initially to have it reviewed and ask for full proposal. So that's a little bit more efficient in terms of effort. Do you guys want to add anything to answering that question? Okay. Someone asked about timing of submittal. Even though it's a rolling basis, is there an advantage to submitting at a specific time in the fiscal year? And the answer to that is no. Unless you guys want to add anything, that would be my answer. Someone asked, maybe Evan, you could take this one, about whether we expect the annual appropriation of Prop 4 funds to be relatively even or vary over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we're basing, we work with others to inform that rollout plan, and we're really basing it on the need and the phasing of our projects that we've been working on. So it could fluctuate from year to year based on need.
Okay, and then we had a question about non-infrastructure projects such as beach cleanups, activities like that are not eligible for bond funds. Generally, it needs to be a capital project where it's resulting in a project on the ground. There were also several questions around what types of projects or planning are eligible. And planning and design and implementation are all eligible activities and for all of the categories. Someone asked if we could elaborate on tribal participation related to federally recognized, non-federally recognized, and what qualifies as serious efforts to engage tribes. Someone want to speak to that?
I could jump in unless somebody else wants to. I think we answered the question about non-federally recognized tribes.
Sorry, this one's more about tribal engagement, to clarify.
Yeah, I was sort of trying to figure out how to answer that. I think this might be a good question to reach out individually. You can reach out to me or anyone on this webinar afterward. It will, it depends on the project, what constitutes serious efforts. I think ideally it would be really great to see a tribe be a funding partner on a project and working together with whoever the applicant is, if not being the applicant themselves, in being engaged on the project from the very outset in developing a project with you and being a partner throughout the project. But it really will vary depending on the project. So please reach out on that one.
I also put in the chat, just copied and pasted from our project selection criteria. We have some sub bullets within there under meaningful engagement with tribes that are some good examples.
Okay, we also had a question about whether the slides will be available afterward or just the recording.
Both.
Thank you. We had a question about what we expect in terms of staff time as proportion to the grant. And I would just say staff time is eligible. We also allow indirect costs. The specifics of that are found in the grantee resources page that I think Megan's slides directed you to. It gives more information on that, but staff time is eligible and it's really determined by the need that the grantee identifies in order to carry out the project. Someone had a question about how do we determine what is cost effective, and a note about how it's a little bit challenging at the federal level, how they define that. Does someone want to speak to how we judge what is a cost effective? I think Trish's slide talked about being a good investment of state funds. Trish, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take that. Well, there's a couple different ways. One, we fund a lot of projects, so we know we have things to compare to. And if your project is much more expensive, we'll generally ask why. And sometimes there's reasons for that, and sometimes budgets can be tightened up. Also with construction projects, especially expensive construction projects, we'd like to see when there's peer review or a value engineering potentially of the cost, which can help confirm that the the costs are what they are. And cost effective doesn't mean cheap. It means you gotta it'll cost what it needs to, but not sort of bloated above that. Megan or Evan, do you guys want to add to that?
Okay, there's a question. I'm not sure what it means. Are there any funds ring fenced for San Diego Bay? Megan, do you know what that question is referring to?
We do not have any specific allocations for San Diego Bay in proposition form, if that's what that means.
Okay, feel free to add back again if we missed that. Yes, if you submit an application now, the funding is not available until the fall. But we're taking applications now so that we can review them and ask for full applications and prepare them for the fall meetings, which we prepare the staff recommendation at least a couple of months in advance. And we would be reviewing the application and working with grantees on details before then. So we definitely will welcome applications now, even though they won't be heard until at least the fall. Someone asked about where they could find a full summary of the climate bond funding areas, amounts, and descriptions. They can't find it online. Does anyone know where's the best?
It looks like
Oh,
Doug
someone
Fleming posted
answered.
a link.
Yes, someone answered.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you, Doug. Is Trinity County included in the eligible areas? I'm not familiar with North Coast enough to answer that. Does someone else have an answer for that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. This is Joel Gerwine, the North Coast Regional Manager. We will consider projects from Trinity County, particularly focused on wildfire resilience, salmonid habitat restoration, or the Great Redwood Trail. Those would be the main nexus for us for a project location that far inland.
Thanks, Joel. There's a question about the rolling application process may disproportionately benefit more resource counties and communities that have the staff support to apply. Will some portion of funds be held to support lower resource counties that may be inclusive of DAC population designations? So I think we stated the minimum of the funding that has to go to DACs and SDACs for Prop 4, but is there more detail that anyone would like to add to that answer about funds supporting lower resource counties? He's raising his hand. Let's see. I can unmute him so he can clarify. Marilyn, can you unmute David Reed? Or David, if you can unmute yourself.
Sure, just a second.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, this is Dave Reed from Santa Cruz County. I've just noticed in statewide granting applications similar to like CAL FIRE, larger counties that have more staff that can apply are able to secure more funds. So I didn't know if there would be regional, some thoughtfulness to kind of making sure that there's some regional distribution so that, whether it be Southern California or Northern California or Central California resourced counties are not disproportionately receiving funds versus smaller, less resourced counties. So not necessarily at the DAC conversational level, but at the regional level. Thank you.
Do you want to respond, Trish? Or should I?
We should.
I would just say that we definitely think about our regional allocations across the state and trying to do it in a fair way. That's partially based on the amount of projects, the amount of people in different regions, the costs of projects, the need for projects. So for across the state, we, all the regional managers, and we meet with staff and we talk about what those needs are, and we try to do it in a fair distribution. And then in terms of under-resourced counties or cities or even CBOs, we've been trying to really change a lot of our processes to support under-resourced applicants in terms of creating a lot of technical assistance materials to help with our grant application process, changing our application process to be this two-step approach, creating these two different manuals, the application manual and the grantee manual to support folks. And also our staff are really involved in projects with when you are awarded a grant from the Conservancy, if you're an under-resourced grantee, our staff provide a lot of support to help with the administrative burden of our projects. So yeah, we've been trying to adapt and in the most equitable way possible. Our strategic plan has a goal of 40% of our funds going to systemically excluded communities, and then the climate bond requires 40% to go to DACs. Anything else you would add, Tricia, Megan?
Nope. Kara, I wanted to jump in with one question I see in the Q&A. Is that okay?
Yep.
Are programs that take underserved youth to the coast for educational and recreational visits eligible? I just want to direct that person to our Explore the Coast program. So this Proposition 4 funding program wouldn't be the right fit for funding for programs such as the one you mentioned, but we definitely fund projects like that here at the Coastal Conservancy. Please go to our website and see our Explore the Coast funding program.
Okay, we have several questions around advance payments, flexibility and overhead as allowed in the bond, and then questions about withholding. Someone want to take that one, how that all works?
I can do those. Or do you want to, Evan? Okay. I think I'm going to go backwards. So withholding, we are on the cusp within probably the next month of having it rolled out of changing our policy. So we will no longer withhold money in an ongoing way with the project, but we will withhold the last 5% up to $100,000 until all the final deliverables have been submitted and the project is ready to close out from our perspective. So not quite there, but we have made the decision and we will be rolling that out soon. So in terms of indirect costs, we will continue to allow that up to 20% of a grant can be, or your indirect costs can be up to 20% of the grant costs. We expect project partners to have a properly calculated indirect rate that they can defend if the project gets audited. This has been an issue with grantees in the past where their indirect rate could not be defended and they were, they owed the state money. So, but we don't know anything about calculating indirect rates. So our policy is up to 20% of the total grant amount. So depending on how you calculate your indirect rate, that the rate can be very different. And then the last advanced payments, we are actually, I'm going to have Evan answer advanced payments.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I'll also just chime in about the indirect cost rate. So Proposition 4 laid out 4 options for grantees and their indirect cost rate, and we are coordinating with CNRA and other CNRA agencies to understand how to implement that. So that is a little bit to be determined, but I know a lot of folks are wondering about their federally negotiated rate as that is allowed in Prop 4. So we will provide guidance soon on that. For advance payment, we, Proposition 4 specifically allows advance payment. There is a caveat that we as a state agency cannot provide advance payments to other state agencies using bond funds. So with the climate bond funds, we won't be able to advance to other state agencies. But if you are a local or a nonprofit or a federally recognized tribe, at this point, we can advance if there's a justifiable reason, a cash flow issue. We have a brand new process that we developed to get requests to become a part of our advance payment, to get accepted, to invoice us for those, and how to document it. I would say some of the new changes is that you need to have an interest-bearing account that you hold the advance payments in, and you're required to use and track and document that interest. So that's a new change according to our new policies. And yeah, we're happy to help you determine if you're eligible for that program. There is a caveat that we can also advance to local agencies using the climate bond. If it's some of our other funding, there's a pilot program that is sunsetting that we may no longer be able to do that. But because Prop 4 has advanced payment language in it, we will be able to do advanced payments to local agencies, federally recognized tribes, and nonprofits if there's a need.
Thank you. Answering some questions in the Q&A as I go, some that are more straightforward. So since we only have a few minutes left, let's see. The grants page application guide PDF date is 2022. Is this the most up-to-date guide?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Got some new ones. Advance payments, yeah, we answered that. Marilyn posted in the chat up to 15%. We talked about overhead. Non-infrastructure projects, we talked about neighborhood scale plans. Not sure what that means. So planning is eligible, if that's what that question means. Somebody asked about monitoring. I answered that in the Q&A. Are prescribed burns, cultural burns, approved projects? That type of activity is eligible under the wildfire resilience category.
Wait, Kara, can we back up to the question about neighborhood scale plans?
Yeah.
And that we do not usually fund that type of planning. That's sort of like at a neighborhood where we fund specific projects, planning for specific projects.
So the question specifically says, I don't know if you can see it, would non-infrastructure projects for coastal resilience be eligible, such as neighborhood scale plans addressing sea level rise?
Yes, potentially. I think that's
Yeah.
probably one where you need to give us more details before we could clarify, but yeah, possibly.
Yeah, and there are a few questions about specific projects. I would say reach out to the regional manager to set up a chat to discuss specific projects and whether they're eligible. That's the best way to get feedback on specific proposals.
Yeah, and just also, there's a lot of questions we're not getting to. We are gonna combine the chat and the Q&A and answer all of them and post that. And if we have everybody's email address, I don't know if that works with Teams, but we can email it out also.
And people asked about match, and we don't have required match. I answered that a little more fully in the Q&A. Is there, oh yeah, you talked about indirect costs. Yep, I think we got most of the questions.
Okay, great. Well, as Trish mentioned, we're going to download all of the chat and the Q&A, and we're going to be posting our responses on our website along with the slides and the recording. So thank you everyone for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we'll be able to work with you soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Really informative. Appreciate it.
Thank you.